reporting part. So wherein we stopped in between there and we went to the vehicle journal. So now where we have seen up to reporting part is the concept of the variables, right? Go on mute everyone. Properties are done. It's not document. Yes, please go on mute. Hello. So now up to where we have seen up to the part where we created some characteristic variable with user entry type of processing type, right? Now, what is basically a variable is? A variable is used to make your query output dynamic. So that means you can control your output of the query at the runtime, right? So we created one query. On this query we started creating a variable. So wherein what I can do? I can control my output of the query at the runtime. That means we are going to control the output of your query, that is after execution of your query. So now, how do you create a variable there? Right click on this, okay? And when we create a variable, we said there are different types of variables are there. Character variable, then text variable used to make the title dynamic, then formula variable is used to make your calculated key figure value dynamic, and hierarchy node variable. And what is that we discussed now? When we discuss about a variable, there is something called as a processing type. Processing type defines how the input value has to be given for the variable, right? No. Online lead sir. Sir, online lead hai. Sriram, online lead hai. Okay, so processing type is how the input has to be given for the variable. Whether user has to type the input manually or system itself automatically has to take the input. There is replacement part. Then what is the other part we have discussed is customer exit, that is by writing some ABAP code, or let us say SAP exit is a ready-made ABAP exit given by SAP, and last one is called as a authorization, that is based on the access given to the user. So we already discussed replacement part, right? So now, suppose how to create a variable, just observe, select the character, right click on this, restrict, so now, what is it we are creating now? The variable. So then, what type of variable is this? Characteristic value variable. So now you want to click on create, give some description. So what is the pop-up that is coming? In that pop-up, this will be the description. So if you want, you can change the technical name of this variable. Type of variable is the characteristic value variable, and processing by what? Right, manual input or replacement part, customer exit or authorization. So now let us, I am saying it should be a manual input. Okay. Then go to the details. In the details wherein what is it? Variable represents. Variable represents means how many inputs can I give for the variable. So variable represents single value means I can give only one input at a time. Multiple single value means multiple inputs can be given. Interval. So usually I said what is it? We select selection option. So that means selection option includes all the things: single value, multiple single values, value ranges, interval. Okay, and variable entry is optional or mandatory. Okay, let us say I'm saying optional, and any default value you want to give it, then save this particular variable, then move it to the excuse me, right side. Okay, that's how we can start creating a variable. Now I have created now cache variable with user entry as the processing type. That is manual input as my processing type. Save and execute it. So now when I execute, a browser is opening, a web page is coming. Now, so next what is it now? After this what we are going to see is next. So it's asking to use the user ID and password. Give it same thing, SAP user. So next what is my requirement now? So now I want to see characteristic variable with replacement path, right? So what is replacement path? I said suppose we have query 1 and query 2. Suppose we have basically two queries, query 1 and query 2. Now what is the requirement of the end user? End user executes the first query and he wants to jump it into second query. That is what is called, we called as RRI, I said, right? Report to report interface. Using RRI, we can jump from one query to another query. Suppose my first query is like this. Suppose a pop-up is coming, enter customer number. Okay, now suppose query is like this, customer number, material and revenue. Suppose in this pop-up user type C1, what happens? It will be showing the values of only C1, right? Let us say C1 has interacted with two materials, 100 and 200. Okay. Then when I jump to my query 2, suppose this was my query 2, material number, material name and material price. Now what should happen? What is the output coming from query 1? M1, and that should act as a input to my, that should act as my, what? Input to my query 1. So now when I jump, it should not show entire query output. It has to show only data of M1, and that is what we said. Now the output of one query should act as the input for another query. Then we use replacement path as the processing type. Remember that part? Now, so now we executed now first query now. So what is happening? Before showing the output of my first query, it is asking for a pop-up. So now in this pop-up, so what are the user types? Only. Now I can give, this is multiple single values. Suppose C1 and C5. What I given is multiple single values, or you want to change, you can change it. Let us say I'm saying value ranges. What do you want? Whether the values what you are doing has to be included or excluded. Suppose I can exclude what? Exclude greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Suppose I said between C1 to C3. This is selection option. That means in the output it will show except C1 to C3, right? So it's showing output what is the values now, C4, C5 and C6, like that. So what you can do, basically you can control your output of the query at the runtime. Suppose I give C1 here, it just shows only values of, that is cached variable with user entry. Now suppose I want cached variable with replacement path, right? So now we are going to look at now the same scenario now, cached variable with replacement path as a processing type. So now first what is that you want? Two queries, query 1 and, so now the one which is sending the output, generally we call it as a sender query. The one which is receiving the output, we call it as a receiver query. So generally using RRI, what we are going to do, you are going to make sender and receiver assignment. Using RRI, what I will be doing, will be creating a sender and receiver assignment. Understand now what is RRI is basically? To make a sender and receiver assignment. Okay, so now first what I am doing, first I am going back to create my second query. Okay, what is that cube name? Just observe. The cube name is YIC underscore DEM, right? So now I am going to create my query number 2. Okay, suppose I am finding for that particular cube. What is the cube name? YIC underscore DEM. This is my cube. So select this particular cube now. Okay. So now what I am doing? So second query what I am taking, one is material number. Then what are the attributes you want? Let us say I am taking material name. Then it may be any design price. Okay, I am just saving my second query. So first query name is YIC underscore DEM Q401, right? Then this is 402, and I am saying this is my what is the description I am giving? My second query. Okay, this is my. So now we have designed my second query. Now just check execute. By executing the second query, look at the output. So it is showing now how many materials are there totally? 5 materials are there. It is showing the information of all the 5 materials, right? So this is my second query. Now, but what is my requirement? I am going to execute my first query. We are going to execute our first query. Okay. When output of query 1 is coming, what is the requirement of the user now? He wants to jump from query 1 to query 2. From the output of query 1, I want to jump to, suppose this is my output of first query now. Now, right click here. Is there any option called go to? Can I jump as of now? No, right. So in order to jump from one query to another query, what I have to do? I need to create a interface between two queries. Now what I am going to show, how to create a interface between two queries. So what is that now? In order to jump from so you call it as jumping of targets, okay? Jump from one query to in order to jump from one query to another. Okay, what I have to do? We have to create a interface between two queries. Okay, that is called as RRI, right? So to create that interface, you have to go with a T code called RS BBS. So now what is that now? So come with a T code called as RS BBS. Just I'm logging on to my BI system. So what is the T code you have to use? RS BBS. Now go with the T code called RS BBS. So what is that? It is maintaining sender and receiver. Excuse me. So maintain sender and receiver assignment. So it's asking for a sender. So from which query you want to jump? That is my first query. So now whether you want one query to be a sender or all queries of that particular cube to be a sender. Right now I want only one query. So just search for your query now. It is stored under favorites. So what is that now? My first query for this is my query number 1, correct? That is the sender. And to where you want to jump? That is the receiver. For that you have to click on create. So now I am connecting two BEX queries here. So you have to select BW BEX query and to where you want to jump now? The receiver query, right? So now just search for that particular this is my info cube. What is it now? My second query for analysis, right? Answer. So now then save this particular assignment. So now what is it now? You have created a interface between two queries. So that is you said you want to jump from this particular query to this particular query. Now just observe now what happens. Now I am executing my first query now. So we are executing our first query now. So what is the value you are giving there? Let us just see one. So in the output shows values of M1 and M2. But right click on this. What is the option first now? Go to. Go to what? Yeah. So now can you I have created interface between now two queries. But when I jump, what is happening? Is output is taken as input? Not yet, right? Still you are not yet created any variable. So still now it is showing output of your query 2. Fine, I can jump. But when I jump, what I said? Jumping is through RRI. Now output should become as a input to my second query. That is what is through replacement path. Now I need to create a variable with what now? Processing type as replacement path. Which query? Query 1 or query 2? You are controlling the output for what? Output of what you are controlling? Output of query 1 I am taking as input to my, that means you are controlling, you have to control now, query 1 is already controlled, that is based on customer number. Now I need to control query 2. So that means you have to create a variable in the receiver query. So now, what is that you have to do? Create a replacement path variable in what? In the receiver query. So now what I am doing, so I am just logging back to the second query. Now, when I am controlling the output of second query, it should be static or dynamic? Output is controlled and shown. So once it's shown, should the user control? No, right? So it has to be controlled only from output of my. So when you want static filter means where you have to put static restrictions. So if you want dynamic filter, we set in the default value. Right? So now what I am doing, I am putting my material number in my character restrictions. Then right click, restrict. Then what you want? Variables. Then I want to, what type of variable is this? Static value variable. Then click on what? Create. So give some description. Replacement path variable. Technical variable is what? Characteristic value. Then processing is by replacement path, right? Processing is by what? Replacement path. So now, if you can see details is disabled now, then go to replacement path. Replace variable with what? Query output. Which query is that? Your? That's it. So give that, then save. Okay. So then just move it to the right side. So now I am controlling we are controlling our output of my second query. I am saying from which it has to be controlled based on my first query. So now, so let us say now I am going back to my first query now. Okay, now save it, then execute it. So it is showing you now the output of your first query. So look at that. I am saying C1. So it's showing the output of only. So now right click on this customer number. Same thing. Go to the second query. So just observe what happens when I jump. What happens? So this is asking for a first query. So now first query output is what? M2 and M3. Right click. Go to the second query. The second query is not executing. Do one thing, once just log out and log in. Just some problems with the demo systems. Okay. give some input here. And now, so I'm right clicking on my first query. So go to actually your second query will be output will be shown here. There it will show only values of M1 and M2. Maybe tomorrow you may check some problem is there. So sometimes it will be showing, sometimes it will not be showing. But what happens? The output of one query will be acting as a input for another. So when I jump now, so here suppose values are M2 and M3. Now when I jump from here, is the properties blocked or something? It's jumping but output is not representing. So there it will show the output of only that M2 and M3. So like that. So using this you can control the output of one query based on another query. Okay. So that is replacement path as your processing time. You know what is cached variable now? So now we'll start with the next is text variable. So text variables are used for making the headings, titles, dynamic. Okay, where and all you can use the text variable, observe now. So now this is your designer. So in the query designer, so you can see in the rows, so select the key figure. What is the description is there? So what is that you can see here? What type of variable is that? Text variable. So wherever description is there, suppose you go to calculated key figure. Okay, what is that here? Text variable, right? So now wherever description you have, that description you want to wherever you have it, right? Description, the description you want to make it as dynamic, then you can use calculated key figures. Sorry, the text variable, right? So it is used in calculated key figures, then restricted key figures heading, or the heading of the query itself. What is there here? The title dynamic. Then you can use it. Now I want the heading to be like this. Okay, revenue of some dynamic value. So what is the dynamic value now? Observe. I'm going to create one text variable there. New variable. What type of variable is this? Text variable. Okay. Enter revenue text. Okay, give some technical name. Then what is the processing type? Manual input or replacement path or customer exit. Select the processing type. Then replacement path is disabled. Then details. And same thing. Variable is optional, and then it is asking the length of the, so what a pop-up you are getting there, what should be the maximum length I can view some length, so save, okay, now revenue of what, some dynamic value, and how this dynamic value has to be given, I said user entry, right? So now just observe now how many pop-ups you get. So this is for controlling your character value, this is for heading. So it's shown only values of C1. What is happening at the heading now? That is a text variable, right? So now suppose if I type here C2, but imagine here I am typing, what happens? Still it shows as what? But like that, will you type the heading like that dynamically? Heading should be taken automatically, right? So in that case, what you use? Text variable with replacement clause. Right now, what you are seeing is text variable with user entry. But now the heading should be taken automatically by the system itself. So then you can use what? Text variable with replacement part. Okay. So now I am showing you how to apply text variable with replacement part. Now I will show you in a bit different scenario so that you can see various options. Now, so let us say these are the key figures what I have. Now, what you are doing, you are controlling the output dynamically, right? Suppose I am controlling the output dynamically. Imagine what is it I am giving? Some. Now what is happening? It is controlling for all the key figures or not? For price also it's showing values of C3, quantity also C3 and revenue also. But let us say now I want to control the output of the query dynamically, we should affect only a particular key figure. That means what you have to use? Restricted key figures, right? I'll use now a restricted key figure. Suppose revenue is there, so I don't want it actual revenue, I'm removing it out. Then I am creating one. We are creating a restricted key figure now. So now what is restricted key figure concept? Whenever you want to control your output of the query for a based on what? Particular key figure. Suppose I want to apply a restriction for revenue. Sorry, just change it. It's in the display mode, go to change mode. So I want to apply a restriction for a revenue based on what? Based on customer number. Okay, right click, restrict. What value you are giving? That time what happens? You are controlling, fine. But what? So now put it in the right side. But what? This is at the design time, right? You are applying a restriction only for a particular key figure, fine, but at the design time, but I want to apply at the run time. That means for a restricted key figure itself, I use as a, sorry, you didn't remove this particular variable. Okay. Now what is happening? So now for price and quantity it shows entire values, for revenue it shows only value of C1, right? But this controlling is done at what time? Design time. I given control with C1 at design time, but I want to control at the run time. That means in restricted key figure itself I use as one, I'll use one variable. So I am removing this C1. So now I want it based on what? Based on customer number, but I am going to apply a variable. So what is that variable we have taken? Customer number entry. That means you are applying a restriction only for a particular key figure at the runtime. Now just observe, now save it, execute it. So same thing, you will get you will get a pop-up now. In this pop-up, what I am typing? Suppose. Now what happens? For these two things it shows entire value, but for this only. That means whatever that value you are giving dynamically is affecting only revenue. Suppose if I give C2 here, can you understand now? But at the same time, at the heading, it has to take as revenue of C2 or C1. Automatically it has to take. So for that, this title I need to make as a dynamic. So then what you do? I'll use a text variable. Right? So now for which one now? For revenue. So I'm saying revenue of some dynamic value, right? So what is the dynamic value now? Observe. I am creating a variable now here. A new variable for text. Okay. Variable text replacement path. Variable type is text variable, but processing is by what? Replacement path. Then it's asking a reference character. What is reference character now? What should be there at the heading? Revenue of C1 or C2 is what? Customer number, right? So your reference character should be what? The customer number. So that means the input given to the customer number will be taken at the heading. And you can see in the replacement path, replace with what? Key means that C1, C2. Suppose if you say label means that cust1, cust2 is there. Suppose if it is okay, month means it will show 0, 3. If you say label means it will show as March, like that. So based upon, you can select key or label. Then it's asking what is it from value. And now suppose if you are giving a range, suppose C1 to C3. The input given for customer character variable is what? C1 to C3. But heading what it will take now? From value means C1. To value means C3. Now you want both, suppose. I want to see C1 to C3 means you have to create two text variables. One with from value, other with to value. So now let us I'm saying from value. Okay, revenue of some. So just look at it. What is it now? New variable for text, right? So if you want to change it, you just change it. Okay, everything is correct, just observe. Okay, replacement path reference character is this key. So then click on save. So once I save it, I'll just take it there. So now the above one, right? The revenue of some dynamic value now. So now just check now what happens. Right now I'll be getting only one pop-up. So this pop-up is for what? Just observe. So now suppose here I have given C2. So for revenue showing only value of C2 at the heading, what is happening? Suppose If I give here C4, it shows values of what? C4, and the heading what is taken? It's taken automatically or not? That is text variable with the replacement part. Suppose if you give range, so we are giving now range. So value ranges from what? C1 to C3. What is going to happen now? It's still showing only because I have given what? From value. Suppose if you have given that two value means it would have taken C3. But now I want to see revenue of C1 to C3 like that, right? So what you can do? So here for this revenue of heading is there now. What is that I'll put? 2. I'll create now one more variable. So same thing, text variable only. Based on what? Replacement part. Then what is it? Customer number. But what is that? 2 value. So 2 from some value to another dynamic value. So now just save this particular query and execute it. It's showing you now, suppose I'm giving again some range. So value ranges from what? C1 to C3. So now what happens? Just check revenue of C1 to. Clear now? So like that. So you can basically make your title, that is headings, dynamic over there. So any doubts in this particular part? Text variable. And last what we have seen is the formula variable, right? The formula variable is used in calculated key figure cases. Suppose now I have something called as a calculated key figure called discount. Discount what I have given? Revenue into, which is 5% of discount I have given, right? But this 5 value I want to give it at the runtime. I don't want to give it in this, but I need to leave the option for the end user. So 2 ranges. So what you want? So how can you give multiple ranges? Just check. You are asking like this. It is taking the first input what you are giving there. Okay. Right. So now come to your calculated key figure now. Revenue into some formula variable. So I am right clicking on this and create a new variable. This is your new variable. Right click, edit this variable, Okay. So I can just give the value of discount. So just give some technical name and whether it is processing is by manual input or replacement path or customer exit. So select that. Then same thing. So save. Okay. But you need not much focus on reporting part. So main thing you have to focus is on R3 extraction. So usually those with 2 or 3 years experience, they may not be working with reporting. So main focus you have to put it on R3 extraction. Okay. So now revenue into what is it? So revenue into the formula variable divided by 100. So now put it in the so now I have given 5 percentage. So in 900 5 percentage is 45. Right? So like that. Suppose if you give 10. So basically you can make your formula variable, right? Formula of your calculated key figure dynamic, right? Okay. So 1600 10 percentage is 160. So like this. So whenever you want to make your calculated key figure value dynamic, so then you can go with what? Formula variable. So this is what is the concept of variables and your query designer. Okay. Then so now query designer is done. So next what I'll start. So next we'll start up with something called types of attributes. What is it now? So we'll come back to our file system only. I can show clearly here itself. Okay, the reporting part is done. So I'll show you WAD at the end. WAD is simple. Okay, so types of. Now, as we have discussed earlier itself, what is an attribute? Attribute is what? What's an attribute? What is an attribute? What's an attribute? Reference characteristic. Is it reference characteristic? Okay, so attribute is one which is depending on your primary key. Yeah, information of your primary key object are called as your attributes. That's why you have seen name, address, phone number, whatever you have taken. They are the depending upon your primary key. So those are called as attributes. Right? So when I'm saying types of attributes, remember attribute is one and the same. What we discussed is same. So but how you are categorizing the types of attributes is based on how they behave at the reporting level. Not at the database level. What is that? It is depending on primary key only. Database level, the object is depending on But how it behaves at the reporting level is called as it. How your categorization is clear. So the types of attributes are categorized based on how it behaves at, not at database level, how it behaves at query level, that is reporting. Okay, the types of attributes are categorized based on how it behaves at what? A reporting level. So now, as of now, we created some info objects, we created some attributes. Now just observe. So the first type of attribute is called as display attribute. What is that now? Display attribute. The first one is called as. So name itself is what? Name itself is what? So display attribute. What is that? So we can only display it. So we cannot do any navigation on that. So now, observe now, we just created one info, we created a cube and all, no? So attributes and all, you can just observe that particular object. So now display attribute is entirely depending on primary key at what? Reporting level. So even your display attribute is what? It is database, it is depending on primary key. Even at reporting level also depending upon your primary key only. Not only at database level, even at reporting level also what? It is depending on the primary key. So it can be used only for what purpose? For display purpose. So display attribute can be used only for what is that? So now observe now, what is the cube we were using? This was the info area. Okay. So now I am just trying to create one query. Just observe. What is the cube name? YIC underscore demo is my cube name, right? So we are just trying to create one query now. YIC underscore demo is my right. So now, if you can see now, the first dimension, what is the character we assign? Customer number. And what is that? It has some attributes. What is that? Address, name, and suppose I am taking address. What is happening? What is happening? Address is depending on what? Suppose if I remove customer number, what happened? Address is gone. Suppose if I bring back address, and can I apply any restriction on address? But what you can do, you can just show the address in your output. But can I do any navigation on that? Drill ups and drill downs, or applying a restrictions, or changing the properties or something? So it's only for what purpose? Display purpose. So right now, by default, what you have created is as of now you have created what is the attribute is, what is that? Display attribute. So now, observe now, what is that info object name? YC underscore CNO, right? So now, just look at your info object now, YC underscore CNO. So this is my info object. Change. So then what you have? Attribute tab is there. So what is that now? Can you see what is that? Name, address and phone number we created. So by default, what is the type? DIS means display attribute, right? So now by default, what you have created as of now is a display attribute. And what is that display attribute is acting as? So it is entirely depending on what? Primary key, even in reporting level. Clear? This part is clear. What is display attribute is clear? Fine? Any doubts with display attribute? So default what you have created as now is display attribute. Now second one is called navigational attribute. So navigational attribute acts as a character at what? Reporting level. So we can use it for what? Navigation purpose. So that means what happens? Navigational attribute, if you make it as a navigational attribute, database level still it is attribute only. Database it is address is depending on customer number only. But at reporting level, it just acts as an individual object. It just acts as a character. So you can apply restrictions, you can apply properties, you can use it for drill ups and drill downs. So you can use it for navigation purpose. Understand now? Now, instead of making as a navigation attribute, suppose directly I'll take in the cube itself. So what are the objects that are acting as a character at report? This customer number and material number, right? Why? Because I have taken customer number and material number inside my info cube. Suppose instead of that I'll take address in the cube itself. Then also it acts as a character only. So what is my question is, instead of making as a navigation attribute, why can't I use it as a character in the cube level itself? Understand now? So if you use in the cube, what happens? Is there any dependency of the database? That means it gives the fact truth. But if it is a navigation attribute, still it gives the present truth only. Understand the logic? So if it is navigation attribute means database level, still it is depending on primary key. But at reporting level, it acts as a character. Clear now? So now, how to make it as a navigation attribute? Suppose address I want to convert it into a navigation attribute. So what is there here? Navigational attribute on/off. So now click on this. What it has become? It became a navigation attribute. So now give some description. I am saying address navigation. Now when I say it acts as a character at reporting level means virtually inside the cube it has to consider as a character. Then only it can act as a character at reporting. So when it want to virtually consider as a character at reporting level, do I require a SID for address also or not? So when you have a navigation attribute, now you will have one more extra table called as X table. As of now, can you see any SID table of attributes? No, right? But once I activate it, just observe. So once we activate it, now what happens? You will get one table called as text table is what? Wherein SID of navigational attribute will be stored. So now your info object is getting activated. Just observe what happens there. Tell me. If you use it in the cube, is there any dependency at the database level? No. No, if you instead of making it the navigation attribute, if I directly use it as a character inside the cube, is that address is depending on customer number? No, right? So that's why I'm still at the database, I'm saying it is depending on your customer number only. That's why I'm saying it gives the present truth. But if you use in the cube, it gives the fact truth. So if it is attribute, if it is a primary key, there is no dependency in the database level. But right now, even though I make it as a navigation attribute, reporting level it acts as a character. But at database level, still it is attribute only. But if you take in, so now we just activated it. We are activating it. So now just observe, you will get one more extra table called as X table. So where is X table? Where? S table is, SID table is the, S table is the SID table of your character info object. X table is the SID table of your navigation attribute. Okay? So now, so this is what is that now? SID table of attribute. Go on mute. Now look at X table. What it has? SID of what? Address. Because virtually inside the cube it has to consider as a character I am saying. So now, clear what is, how to make as a navigation attribute is clear? Now I have made it as a navigation attribute. Now this customer number I have used in n number of cubes. First you have specified at info object level. Next you have specified at info provider level. Now for which cube it has to act as a character, right? So now, what is that cube now? YIC underscore demo. Okay, I'm just trying to change this. So what is there here? You can observe. So now can you see address is coming? So what is the name? See, name of this navigation attribute is customer number, character name hyphen. So if I select it, then only on this cube, what the queries that you are creating, it will act as a character. Specifying at info object level is not enough, so you have to specify even at info provider level also. So now I am specifying for my cube also, then activate it. Press on that. Now, on this particular cube, now when you create a query, what happens now? Address will be acting as what? Character. So now observe now. So just try to create a or just log out once. Programs, Business Explorer, Query Designer. Okay, now just observe now. So try to create a query now. So expand customer number. Can you see what is it? Address navigation. So now drag it. Is it bringing any customer numbers? It's just acting as a character or not? So now you can start applying the properties. You can use it for applying a restriction or a variables or anything. So just it behaves just like a character at reporting level, but in the database level still it is attribute only. Clear now? See? Can I apply a restriction? Everything is done. So like that. So what is it now? Can you see now that how to make as a navigation attribute? So when you make as a navigation attribute, you have an extra table called as what? X table. So clear what is navigation attribute? Any dots with navigation attribute? Done. So now the third one what we are going to discuss is called exclusive attribute. Okay, what is that now? Exclusive attribute. Okay. So now what is exclusive attribute? Name itself what? It can be used exclusively as a attribute. So you cannot use it as a character anywhere. So exclusive attribute can be used only as an attribute. So that means you cannot use it inside your cube, or you cannot convert it into your navigation attribute. So now observe now how it is exclusive attribute is. Suppose imagine your name is there. While creating this name, while creating an info object, there is one checkbox. What is that? Attribute only. If I select it, that's nothing but an exclusive attribute. Can I convert into navigation attribute now? So when you are creating an info object, there is one checkbox called as attribute only. If you are selecting it, that will become a exclusive. That means this name can be used only as an attribute. So you cannot use it as a character anywhere. Here, what is exclusive attribute now? How can you make as exclusive attribute? So when I remove that symbol is coming. Clear? Exclusive attribute is clear. So which can be used only as a attribute. Then next. So next is called time dependent display attribute. Okay, what is that now? Time dependent display. Now as of now what you have seen, customer number, let us say address I have shown. Suppose C1 is from Bangalore. I loaded some 3 months back. What is the date I said? C1 is in. So let us say C1 was in Bangalore from January 2010 to June 2010. Then C1 moved to Chennai in July 2010, and he was there in Chennai from July 2010 to December 2010. But if we are loading like this, what happens? C1 is over, Bangalore is overwritten by. So now, suppose if you develop a report of March 2010, what it will show? Chennai only, right? Because in the database I have, but I don't want like that. If it is a report from Jan to June, it has to show as Bangalore. If it is a report from July to December, it has to show as. That means, in your master table, what I do? Will make it as time dependent from date to to date. So now, while loading master data, you have to load what? Even the time also. So from Jan 2010 to June, he is in Bangalore. So then from July to December. So why it will not overwrite here? Because even in this, now to date will also will be a part of primary key. Now unique value is what? Along with C1. That means when you want to maintain your master data with respect to time, when we can go what? Time dependent. So that means while loading, you will get two more extra columns. What is that? From date as well as to date. So when we make display attribute as time dependent, that's nothing but time dependent. So now, as of now, you have seen master data table is what? P table, right? What you have seen master data table is? So now, so P table is what? This is time independent master data. That means in your P table, is there anything like that with respect to time? Only customer number is there and its attributes are there, right? So when you make it as time dependent, the data will be stored in Q table. So then you have a table called as what? So what data will store here? Time dependent master data will be stored in the. I'll give the table names at the end, but first observe. So now suppose right now my phone number is a display attribute. Suppose I want to convert it into time dependent. So then what is it now? Can you see what is it? A small checkbox is here. So just click on this. Now this is time dependent display attribute. Now observe now, you will get one more extra table called as Q table. Now you get one more extra table called as what? What is that now? Master data time. Now what is the data storing here? The data related to phone number. So phone number is made time dependent. So look at now what is it? Customer number is there. And what is it? Date 2 is also a part of primary key and date frame along with what? Phone number. Clear now? So phone number data stored. Tell me. You have to now file is created. Now when you are loading in your file, what you have to do? You have to put extra two more columns, to date as well as from date. Yes. I am not table after table is created, or you are extracting, or you once you extract table is created. So now it will take the default values, that is from date is 1000, to date is 9999. Default values it will take. Now when you load, it will take the actual values. Yes. Clear now? Now look at your P table now, what it has, name and now there is some data in name and address is in P table, then phone number is in Q table. But for reporting you want both. That's why you can see there will be one view called as M. View of. So M is a view between P and Q. So what is that now? M is there. This is a view. So this is what? View between the P and Q tables. So now it has now combined these two tables. One is Q table, other one is P table. So now it has all the fields. Customer, name, address, phone number, due date and so now what is time dependent display attribute? Then same way you have time dependent navigational attribute. So now if you make now, when you say now navigation attribute, now SID is to be generated, but there it has to consider to date as well as the customer number also, right? That means when you have navigation attribute, you have something called as Y table. So what is Y table? Y table is the SID table of time dependent navigational attribute. So SID of time independent navigation attribute will be stored in X table. SID of time dependent navigation attribute will be stored in Y table. So now look at this now. How is it? Address is a navigation attribute. Suppose I am selecting it as time dependent. So look at now, you will not have any X table. What happens? What the table is going to generate is now Y table. See? Slash. So what is Y? It has SID of address, because it has to include to date also, no? Now, I have two things. One is address and phone number are time dependent. If you look at Q table, what data you have now? Both address as well as phone number. Clear now what is time dependent navigation attribute? Then next you have something called transitive attribute. So what is transitive attribute is? Already I have discussed this. Attribute of an attribute is called as transitive attribute. So attribute of an attribute is called as what? The transitive. Now, what is that now? So we created now, suppose customer number. So while creating customer number, what I said? So address is depending on. Now address is also one info object. It also has the attribute tab. Suppose there I specify something called as location. So address is attribute towards customer number. Location is attribute towards. So then in this case, what you will say? Location is transitive attribute towards. So when I discussed with InfoSec, I said you this part already. Location is transitive attributes towards customer number. So now you can see now, suppose address is there here. Address is also having an attribute tab. So in this attribute tab of address, suppose I specify location. Location is attribute towards address. Address is attribute towards location, customer number. Okay? That is transitive attribute. Clear what is transitive attribute? And last, next you have something we call compounding. So instead of compounding attribute, instead of saying compounding attribute, I will say compounding info object. What is the use of it? Means it's also an attribute, right? Now location is depending on address. Address is depending on customer number. Then it's for reporting purpose only, right? Ultimately, what you are doing is reporting purpose only, right? Just like one. So normally I cannot develop a report on a transitive attribute. For developing a report on transitive attribute, you have to use a info set. So there I can represent a report with customer number as well as address, even customer number as well as location also. Yes. Now, what is that now? Next. Yes. So what is that now? Compounding. Now what you have seen, we are creating customer number and I was loading some data to my customer number, right? C1, C2, C3, suppose like this. Now for this customer number, suppose we are extracting data from two systems. right? Source system 1, source system 2. Now, when I am extracting data from customer number, so let us say from source system 1, now I have data, what is that? C1. But let us say C1 is refers to name as AB. So when I am extracting from source system 2 also, there may be one customer number by name C1. But let us say this name is. Now if you directly load the data into this customer number, what happens? It gets, but actually there are two separate records. C1 coming from source system 1, C1 coming from source system 2. Or let us say, imagine I have something like material number and plant. So material number in plant 1, two plants I have. So for plant 1 I am taking material name as some in material plant 1, the material 1 is called as iron. When it comes to plant 2, this material is, let us say, something. So if you load like this, what happens? It takes as only, but actually this material number, both the plants they refer the same name, but it's actually different materials. That means when you are creating now, suppose an info object, now if you do like this, what happens? It will override. That means I need to take these two as a part of my primary key. Then, so while creating the material number, I'll say plant is my compounding info object. When I'm creating customer number, I'll say source system together now. Clear now what is compounding info object? That means you are basically making two fields as a part of primary key. Clear? So where is the compounding? Last tab. Suppose I have an info object called zero source system. Something is, that info object is not there. So now wherever I use this object will become a zero source system ID. So now whenever I use this object, now what happens? That source system ID is also a part of compounding it will take. Okay, so like this. So that is what is compounding objects. Okay, clear now? So now look at the tables of your master data tables now. So info object tables, look at the tables now. What are the tables of your info objects here? So earlier you have seen, you know, only three tables, right? P, T, yes. So now I will show you all the things. So P is right time independent master data. Then you have Q. Q is what? Time dependent master data. Okay. Then what is it? I have M. M is what? View between P and Q. Then you have something called T. T is what? Master data of type text. Then S is SID of what? The character info object, that is the primary key. Then you have X. X is what? SID table of, SID table of navigational attribute. Then you have what? Y. Y is SID table of X is what? Time independent. So when it comes to Y, what is Y table of? So now these are all the tables of your info object.